folks, welcome back to My Kitten Reads. I'm Eleanor and this is my August 2020 wrap-up. I read a lot of things, especially when you consider that it was the other part of my Incryptid short story binge that I mentioned starting in July. So yes, the first thing I read in August were, I think it's 22 Incryptid short stories. This is from Seanan McGuire, her Incryptid series, which is urban fantasy about a family of cryptozoologists. So the stories that I read, I have a list, in August were Bury Me in Satin, Snakes and Ladders, Broken Paper Hearts, The Star of New Mexico, The Way Home, The Lay of the Land, Target Practice, Blocked, Bad Dream Girl, Jammed, Survival Horror, Red as Snow, Black as Blood, White as Raven's Wing, The Ghosts of Bourbon Street, I Am, Snake in the Glass, Swamp Bromeliad, Waking Up in Vegas, My Last Name, Sleepover, and Balance. So that was the Incryptid stories I read. Some of them were still the prequel stories, and then we actually moved on to some of the characters, both main characters and side characters from the novels. So there was a suite of them that were antimony themed. There were a trilogy of stories that were one of the minor characters from the first book. And well, two of the minor characters actually, as a couple. So there were a bunch of other ones as well. So they were fun. That seems like so long ago. August seemed really long. The thing is about August is, of course, my uni started again. So that was great. I also had a bit of a relaxed readathon. So you'll have seen some of these before. So the next thing I read after the Incryptid shorts was I reread Tea and Sympathetic Magic by Tansy, Rayner Roberts via audio, via the Sheep Might Fly podcast. So that is a sort of a Regency themed fantasy world. And it was about courtship and preventing courtship by using sympathetic magic, because, you know, it's not really a romance if the person can't actually consent out of their own mind. So that was fun. And then I finished Say Yes to the Marquess by Tessa, which was the second in the, I think it's called the Castles Ever After series. I'm pretty sure the only thing that links it together as a series is that each heroine, just before the book, inherits a castle. And that gives them varying levels of independence and goals and things like that. But yeah, this was Say Yes to the Marquess, in which our heroine wants to dissolve her engagement because her fiancé has been, it was an arranged marriage. Her fiancé has been doing his diplomatic work for years and left her by herself. She's inherited this castle. She thinks, I could do something with this. I could do my own brewery. I want to dissolve the agreement. So I'm going to speak to his brother, who is a prize fighter. Yeah, shenanigans ensue. So that was fun. I also reread The Castle of Otranto out of sheer kind of, I don't know. I was listening to some podcast episodes from my university English department, which of course I originally read Castle of Otranto for an English class. And it just the podcast put me in the mood to reread some of the classics and the Gothic novels that I'd read previously. So I reread The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole, which is ridiculous. It is essentially the first, considered pretty much the first of the Gothic novel oeuvre. And it is so silly, so ridiculous. But that's what Gothic novels are. So I reread that. I also reread Anne of Green Gables, again because of this podcast, which is a favourite of mine. I haven't gone any further in the series. I just picked up Anne and reread that. So, I mean, really, Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery, who doesn't know what that's about, really? Or if you're on my channel, if you're watching my channel, I'd be surprised because I've talked about it a lot. Then I started my uni reading. So I read The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro. So this, Ishiguro is a Nobel Prize winner for literature, and this is very Arthurian. It's set after Arthur's died. In Britain, there are Saxons, there are native Britons, and it centres around this native Briton couple who want to go and visit their son, but they can't really remember a lot. And there's this whole thing about memory, and there's this mist, and they find out that this mist is what's causing everyone to forget things. And they meet up with a Saxon knight and who's searching out for this dragon, and they meet up with Sir Gawain, the Green Knight, so Sir Gawain, the Arthurian knight, and just, yeah, it's weird. It's a bit weird. It wasn't really my thing. It's very much about memory and forgetting and the consequences of forgetting and what the consequences might be of remembering again. And this relationship between these two older people. So yeah, that's The Buried Giant. Not quite my style. After that, we went to something that apparently is quite my style, and that's The Grand Sophy by Georgette. So my mother has read and reread to the point that her copies are falling apart, all of Georgette, who is essentially the mother of the Regency romance genre. Although I think she wrote like mysteries as well. So yeah, but I really enjoyed this. I went into it knowing, and I think I mentioned this in my problematic faves video, I went into it knowing there were some racial issues. There are definitely some racial issues, particularly with a Jewish character. That's uncomfortable, but that's only about a chapter. The rest of it, it was just a romp. It was so much fun. I loved Sophy as a character. Essentially, Sophy, her mother died when she was very, very young. She's been raised on the continent by her father, who's like a diplomat or with the foreign service or something rather like that. But he's got to go to South America, and so she's sent to live with her aunt. Her aunt who, because her husband was a bit of a gambler and was in a great deal of debt, her son inherited from another relative, and he's very sensible, and so he controls the household because he's the one that kind of paid off debt and took over the estate and all that kind of thing. Clashes ensue because Sophy is independent and strong and does what she wants. But always with a kind heart and you know, she makes a bit and she meddles a bit, but she also always wants to help. Basically, she's kind, she's compassionate, she's friendly, but drives this cousin of hers completely bonkers. And of course it's a romance, so you know where it's going. But that's The Grand Sophy by Georgette. After that, I finished issue 31 of Uncanny magazine, which means I have finished the 2019 issues. That was the last one. It was pretty good. You know me, you know, collections and magazines of short fiction can be variable depending on what's actually in that particular issue. But I love Uncanny magazine. I've just backed it for yet another year, for year 7. The two things that kind of stood out to me a bit in this one was there was a very long story at the start. I'm not sure if it was quite a novella, but it was quite long. It took me a couple of sessions at the gym to get through it. But it was by Elizabeth Bear, and it was like a time travel mystery in that you had this actress in the future who was playing this role in this musical, I think, that was based on a video game that was based on a true story of a bunch of murders that happened in like the 80s, I think. But no one ever actually found out, like it was unsolved. And the play has multiple endings. And so she accidentally time traveled because one of the victims turns out was messing with like a time bending machine, and lands in the house the weekend that these murders are going to happen. And so it's all about her trying to figure out what's going on, her knowing that she needs to go home, but wanting to know the character that she's playing, the real person, and therefore time changes, because she does figure out what happened, and it's, you know, and but what happened changes because she's arrived. Yeah, so that was kind of interesting. And there was also this story that was, what was it called? It was a superhero story by Jen Reese about an all-girls superhero academy, and this girl that gets sent there because she's got, like, mind powers, and everyone's kind of wary at her, and always like, she's probably going to go supervillain, no one wants to be a friend. And then she gets this crush on this other girl and ends up figuring out that actually whether or not she goes hero or villain, it's her choice to make. So that was fun. And then the last thing I read in August was also for uni, and that was A Scot in the Dark by Sarah McLean. So this is a contemporary Regency romance. So it's like contemporary as in it's written fairly recently. I'm not exactly sure when it was published. In the 21st century, I think. 2016. So it's actually the second book in the Scandal on Scandal series. It's about essentially 17 people die to make this Scottish guy a duke. Like in a 2-week period, 17 dukes in a row die. Like 17 heirs die. To make this random Scottish lord a duke, which he wants nothing to do with. He looks after the business side of things, but doesn't want to go to London, doesn't want to do any of that. He considers himself a Scottish brute due to stuff that happened in the past. And then he finds out 5 years later that he has a ward that no one told him about, and she's got herself embroiled in a scandal. And that's Lillian. And what happened was she fell in love with an artist. She allowed him to paint her nude on the agreement that no one would ever see it. And then he announces in public at the Royal Academy of Art that in 10 days' time he's going to reveal this painting and that she's the model. So she's ruined, basically. She's humiliated, she's ruined, and he laughs at her when she's like, you promised to marry me, and he's like, no, I didn't. So, and he's like, you said no one would never see it, and he's like, whatever, consent, it's not a thing I'm worried about. So the Duke comes down from Scotland to try and figure out what to do to protect her. She just wants to wait a few days until she turns 25 and therefore inherits £5,000, and then she wants to run. She wants to leave. But he's like, no, we're going to, marry you to someone else and rebuild your reputation. Yeah. So it's a romance. But this is the one. I nearly threw this book across the room so many times. Not because it was bad, but because apparently cyclical self-loathing is not something that I'm keen on. So it's nearly 400 pages of them getting closer to each other and going, oh, I like her, I like him, but we're both not worthy. I'm not worthy, back away. Over and over and over again. It drove me mad. I mean, I'm vaguely interested in maybe reading the other books in the series because there's these Talbot sisters, which seem really cool that I think the other books are about. But like listening to the lecture about this book, it's apparently a kind of examination of what today we would call nude photo scandals, but setting it in Regency London. Not technically Regency London because it's set in 1834 and the Regency finished in like 1820 or something like that. And technically it's not even Georgian, I don't think, because it's after King George IV passed away, which means it's actually William, who was his brother, who was king before Victoria was queen. Anyway, but it's a Regency-esque romance. That drove me mad, but was kind of interesting and is a kind of a critique on the way scandal works these days, but set in Regency. So that's kind of interesting. And I might read the other books if they're not the same cyclical self-loathing, which drove me bonkers. So bonkers. Give me the Grand Sophie any day. But that's what I read in August. So if you've read any of them and want to talk about them, comment down below. Always happy to talk. It was a pretty good reading month. Pretty good. Even if you ignore the Incryptid books at the stories at the start, it was still a pretty good reading month. So, I didn't do particularly well for any of my goals, except Say Yes to the Marquess is one of the series that's on my series list. And also it was another issue of Uncanny magazine, which I would like to try and catch up on. I'm not doing quite so well at the moment because I haven't been able to run because I hurt my hip. But yes, otherwise, it was a pretty good reading month. That was, at least the second half of it was very focused on my university. But I get a bit of a break from that now because this coming week we're doing a TV show and then we've got 2-week break. So I've got an assignment to do by the end of next week. But otherwise, I'm going to have a little bit of a break before I have to read the next book on the list. So yeah, I'm trying to do some work on goals. Yeah, we'll see what September brings. Bye.